Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserlo.
Well, sometimes things just don't go as planned. Welcome back into the Four Tire Change podcast. Dawson Iserlo with you here on ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Sunday was supposed to be an incredible day in motorsports. It's the longest day in motorsports. 3 big events. The Monaco Grand Prix in F1 starts it off in the morning, at least for us here in the States, it's in the morning. Then the Indy 500 in the early afternoon. Then the Coke 600, the longest race of the NASCAR Cup Series season, at night. Unfortunately, 2 of these 3 events were altered by weather. One of them did not even get to run in its entirety, and we're here to break it down for you. It started off with the Monaco Grand Prix. We don't do a ton of F1 talk on this podcast, but I was up and was able to watch it, of course, to begin what I thought was going to be really like the Super Bowl of motorsports, the biggest day of the year, at least in volume. The Daytona 500, of course, has its own significance within the NASCAR realm, but for really the 3 different disciplines and really multi-different countries involved in the whole world with F1, and then over to Indy 500 and the NASCAR Cup Series at the Coke 600. It's supposed to be just a fantastic day. And it got going with a good race at Monaco. Obviously, I know people don't love the racing at Monaco. F1's racing is a whole different conversation. And again, it's not really our domain here. But I thought it was entertaining. It was cool that Max Verstappen isn't necessarily dominating the F1 season as much as he did last year and in recent years. So that was cool to see. And you get a new winner with Ferrari taking it home and Charles Leclerc there. So all in all, pretty exciting Monaco Grand Prix for me, at least. I just love the scenery, everything around it. Again, I'm not a hardcore F1 fan, so I know the racing at Monaco is not as good as it is at other tracks, but I still enjoyed it. And that was kind of a nice start to the day, right? The little appetizer. Have your coffee and enjoy Monaco. And that was supposed to lead us right basically into the Indy 500, all the pre-race festivities and everything like that, with Kyle Larson, as I mentioned last year, getting to do the double here, racing at the Indy 500. Then he's going to hop over, fly to Charlotte for the Coke 600. That didn't go as planned because there were rainstorms in the area, and Indy had to push back the start time by a couple of hours. So then at that point, it kind of became clear Kyle Larson was going to have to make a decision. His decision was to stay at Indy. And we eventually did get the Indy 500 going, and there weren't any weather delays once the race started, so that was good. There were a lot of crashes, a lot of mistakes were made, and it wasn't necessarily the best Indy 500 that I've seen. Again, I'm less into Indy than I am into NASCAR, so I'm not pretending like I know how every single one of those races go. But it did have an exciting finish, which I feel like the Indy 500 always delivers as far as excitement down the stretch. Joseph Newgarden battling it out and getting his 2nd consecutive Indy 500 win. Kyle Larson was in the mix, running top 10 until a speeding penalty late put him to the back of the field, and he unfortunately just finished 18th. So that was done, and the Coke 600, before that race ended, got underway over at Charlotte on time. Justin Allgaier, who's one of my guys there in the Xfinity Series, I'm a big fan of Justin's, he got the opportunity to run and fill in for Kyle Larson, at least until Larson got there. The plan was Larson's going to stay, do his due diligence in the Indy 500. He's going to jet over and take over that car whenever he gets there. Well, unfortunately, as we'll get into in a minute here, he never got there when the racing was still going on. But a pretty good Coke 600 early on. Intriguing racing. It's Charlotte. That's been pretty good on the mile and a half here with the new package, so everything was going well. You had some different leaders there, different cars at the front of the field. Christopher Bell kind of started to take over in the later stages of what we got actually raced under, no rainy conditions. But Brad Keselowski was surging. You had a couple other cars that felt like they were going to really be in the mix. Tyler Reddick had started at the back. He had made his way up through the field. Justin Allgaier, who started also in the back because of the driver change, had gotten all the way to 13th. And he kept saying on the radio, guys, this car is super good. When Kyle Larson gets here, he's going to have a chance. So there was this big buildup as Larson leaves Indy. They're tracking the helicopter. They're tracking the plane, whatever they need to do to get him to Indy, to get him to Charlotte from Indy. And there's kind of this really exciting buildup of like, man, Larson's going to get there. And then the caution flag comes out for rain right as Larson is getting to the track. And you think, okay, maybe it's going to be a quick shower. The forecast looked iffy, but okay. Like, we can maybe get this in. And then the rain just keeps coming. But Larson's there. He's ready to make the driver change. Allgaier's got the car in a good spot. They're on the lead lap. We're going to see this crazy crossover thing happen. He's going to switch. He will have to go to the tail end of the lead lap, but he'll be fine, right? He's going to roll. And then the rain kept coming, and it kept coming, and it got really bad. And eventually, it started getting to the point where it was like, man, this is going to be tough to drive the track. But a couple hours later, everything stops. Rain is done. We look like we're going to get this thing dried. We get the jet dryers out there. Let's roll. Let's get it going, NASCAR. We're going to finish the Coke 600. It's going to be a late night, later than even we already anticipated. But we're going to get this thing going. and we watched some radioactive best of clips on Fox Sports. We're talking to drivers in their motorhomes. Everybody's just kind of hanging out, waiting this thing out as we always do in a rain delay. But the general idea is we're going to get this race in. Like, it's not raining anymore. That's not even a question. Forecast looks pretty good. We're good to go. And then we get this cinematic shot coming in of Mike Joy in the Fox booth alongside Clint Boyer and Kevin Harvick. And right when they came on, I kind of said, okay, I don't know what this vibe is not good. This doesn't sound like they're about to say, hey, 20 minutes till we start this race over again. And they announced that the humidity in the area was causing the jet dryers to not be able to get the track dry. It was still wet. They were looking at well after 1 a.m., they thought, until they could get it dry. And ultimately, they called the race. It was over halfway. So, of course, if a race is over halfway in NASCAR, it's official. And they decided to call it. What a bummer. I mean, just what a disappointing finish. Because, again, you had all these storylines building into this whole Kyle Larson's now going to get in that 5 car. Allgaier says the car's great. Feels like he's going to have a chance to drive it to the front. Even if he's not a factor, we got Keselowski surging for maybe another win after it took him so long to get his first. You got Christopher Bell going to try and fend him off. We'll see who else can kind of come up and challenge. A couple other Hendrick cars that were in the mix there. Byron had some good runs at different points in the race. You're figuring, a couple of those Gibbs cars. Denny Hamlin had kind of been middle there, kind of starting to find some speed, so maybe he becomes a factor late. Like all these different storylines at what is a crown jewel event in the NASCAR Cup Series, one of their majors, and it's called short due to rain. Just really disappointing. Look, I understand if NASCAR says the track wasn't getting dry, the track wasn't getting dry. I'm not going to act like they lied about it. I mean, and now, look, did they have the correct protocol? I would imagine so. Like, they're used to drying tracks off. So, I guess it was some sort of weird atmospheric pressure situation with the humidity and all that. But, I do have a couple of thoughts about this. And I saw, look, Toby Christie, who does a great job over with motorsport.com, brought it up. He thinks there should be a different policy for the Crown Jewel events. Remember the Crown Jewel events, the Daytona 500. You got the race, the night race at Bristol, the Southern 500, and here the Coke 600. That those should be treated differently. And I kind of agree with him. The policy is if a race is over halfway, we're going to call it, right? If we can't get it in that night. We're not going to come back tomorrow to finish a race that's already more than halfway. And I agree with that in most situations. It's a regular Pocono race. It's a regular Kansas race. It's a regular race at Sonoma. Like, we're going to call it. I'm okay with all that. For the Crown Jewels, I do think you should have a different policy. I'm okay with, staying later, which they were willing to stay late to an extent, but I understand not wanting to restart the race at 2:30 in the morning. Like, there comes a point where it gets ridiculous. But if it is a Crown Jewel race, I think you should give it a shot on Monday to finish the race in its entirety. 600 scheduled laps. Again, the whole appeal of the Coke 600 is that it's the longest race in the sport. It means more. There's an extra stage built in here. Remember, 3 stages plus the race finish. So really 4 stages that give out points in this race. Just disappointing to see it end like that. And I would love to see the policy readdressed at some point. Now, the other big topic is Kyle Larson getting a waiver. So technically, in the NASCAR Cup Series, in order to be eligible for the championship, you have got to start every race. They do that because they don't want drivers to get a win, be locked into the playoffs, and then just sit out the rest of the season or sit out certain races that maybe they don't think they're going to have speed at. They want their stars in every race, and so I fully understand the rule. There's certainly been tons of exceptions for it, right? If a driver gets injured, they didn't want drivers to be faking injuries or should I say, trying to hide injuries because they know they have to start every race to be eligible for the championship. So they said, look, if you get hurt, you're going to get a waiver. Then, of course, things like last year happened where Chase Elliott breaks his leg, but it's not in a NASCAR race. He does it snowboarding on his own during the season. They still granted him a waiver. And this year, Kyle Larson obviously was planning to be there. He was planning to race and start the race. And things changed with the weather, and he decided to stay for the 500. He got there. He was going to be able to at least get in the car and log some laps. But ultimately, he has to apply for a waiver. It's widely speculated that NASCAR is going to approve this thing. By the time this podcast comes out, it might already be decided that NASCAR is going to approve Kyle Larson's waiver. I don't think there's any scenario in which they don't. But it sparked some debate, and I listened to Jordan Bianchi of The Athletic kind of go back and forth with Jeff Gluck. I always enjoy listening to those two guys. And Jordan is of team no waiver. He does not think you should get a waiver. And he, brought up some valid points about precedent and where do drivers start trying to skip NASCAR races for other events if this is allowed. I do think it's different. I think the Indy 500, first of all, is one of the biggest. It is the biggest race in the world. Over 300,000 people, I think, in attendance at Indy on Sunday. Also, this was good for NASCAR, no doubt about it. Like, Kyle Larson was the talk of the garage area in all, different disciplines there. In the Indy 500 and the Coke 600, there's some talk about him within, just international circles. Like, everyone was interested to see Kyle Larson pull this off. So I don't think you should penalize a driver for doing what is really, really good for NASCAR in general, which NASCAR needs growth. Like, it needs things like that. So also, if you were to not grant this waiver, you are now basically discouraging drivers from trying to do incredible things like this. And again, I understand there's difference. If he says, if a driver said, hey, I want to go race at Monaco in F1, and I have no intentions of getting back for the Cup Series race, it's just the flight's going to be too long or whatever it may be. And actually, Monaco, by the way, I thought about this. I think you could get there if it was a possibility. Obviously, F1's not really like that. You can't just jump into a car the way you somewhat can in Indy car. But anyway, in this hypothetical situation, I don't think, if you had no intention of getting back for the Cup Series race, I think it'd be very different. And I do think Larson should get the waiver, and I do think he will. But it was an interesting debate to kind of hear both sides of it. I just think we should be for growing NASCAR as best as we can, especially in a time right now where, the popularity's teetering. There's some areas in NASCAR that are thriving. There's some areas in NASCAR that are still behind as far as making it one of the most popular sports in the United States and beyond that, which of course they're working on growing as well. We're going to see likely races in Mexico coming up. We've seen races all across the country and in different locations. So, all that being said, Christopher Bell gets the win here in this shortened race. Not even sure if I mentioned that at this point, which is really awesome for Christopher Bell. I think it's something that, he really needed. He's having an up and down season. So for him to get it at this point is big for him. And we'll see if he can kind of keep this momentum going or if he can kind of create some momentum coming out of this situation, because it's been so up and down for him. But that's a team that feels pretty streaky. Would he have held on to win this race if it went its scheduled distance? I don't know. I think I would have really liked the chances of guys like Brad Keselowski and some of those other surging drivers towards the end of Stage 2, into Stage 3. But all in all, Bell gets a big-time win to boost his playoff stature. Coming up this week, Gateway. It's an interesting one. It's another track that we haven't gone to a ton of times in the Cup Series circuit. I like it. It's kind of unique, a mixture between a short track and an intermediate, somewhere kind of in between there. Who's going to bring speed there? I think, look, you obviously have to go Gibbs and Hendrick because it's a broken record. I understand that. But I have been impressed with what that, RFK team has been doing with Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher having speed consistently. Penske, I don't know what to make of it. Blaney's day ended early at the Coke 600. He was the defending champion there. I'm still waiting for Penske to show me something, and so maybe this is foolish, but give me Penske. Give me a big statement win. And I'll go with the guy I just mentioned, Ryan Blaney. I'm kind of done picking Joey Logano for now. That hasn't gone well for me. But they had the momentum at the All-Star race. Maybe Penske kind of finds something at Gateway. I like their chances over there to right the ship. And if not, it's going to be tough. The last piece of news I wanted to get to, it's widely expected that Stewart-Haas is going to be announcing essentially what's expected, that it's going to be announced that they're going to sell all their charters. And that's disappointing for me. I did a lot of talking about Stewart-Haas, how I said how dire I thought the situation was in the offseason. But what's crazy is they kind of came out and proved me wrong in some ways. They were so good at the beginning of the year, and they've been so consistent with guys like Chase Briscoe and Noah Gragson, who have had kind of standout years. I know they've struggled with Ryan Preece. I know they haven't had all their cars. Like Josh Berry's been a little bit up and down, but I was impressed with it. But it seems like they're going in a different direction. I don't even have time to get into all the wormholes that this could be going down. Who's getting these charters? Is Junior Motorsports interested in a Cup charter? Does, obviously I think it would be assumed that Trackhouse picks one up here. 2311 probably picks up another. I don't know. But are they really going to sell all 4 charters? This could be one of the bigger shifts in the NASCAR charter landscape since charters were introduced. I guess there's been some other really big ones at different times, but feels massive to me, and we'll see kind of how it goes. So that'll do it for this week here on 4 Tire Change. We'll see what happens at Gateway, and we'll be back again next week. Keep tuning in, liking, comment, subscribe, and join the movement.